In every age of human history, moments of destiny have been decided not by kings in palaces or scholars in libraries, but on the battlefield. Vast empires have risen from victory, while others crumbled into dust after crushing defeat. The fate of nations, religions, and entire civilizations often hinged on a single day, sometimes a single hour, of combat. Imagine how different our world might look if just one of these great battles had ended differently. Today, we'll journey through time and uncover 10 of the greatest battles in history, conflicts that shaped borders, toppled rulers, and forged the future of humanity. But as you'll soon discover, victory often came at an unimaginable cost. Let's begin our story in 490 BCE, on the plains of Marathon. The mighty Persian Empire, the superpower of its age, had landed a vast army on Greek soil. Their mission was simple: crush Athens and punish the Greeks for daring to resist the Persian king, Darius. Facing them was a much smaller Athenian force, fighting not just for their lives, but for the very survival of Greek independence. When the clash came, the Greeks shocked the world. Using brilliant tactics, they enveloped the larger Persian army and drove them back to their ships. The victory at Marathon didn't just save Athens. It preserved the fragile experiment of Greek democracy, ensuring that ideas of freedom, philosophy, and politics would continue to flourish. Had the Persians won, the cultural story of the Western world might have ended before it began. Fast forward nearly 300 years to another epic showdown. The Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Here, a young king named Alexander of Macedon faced the colossal Persian Empire. Now, under Darius III, the battlefield was chosen carefully by the Persians, a flat plain designed to showcase their war elephants and massive cavalry. Outnumbered, Alexander's army was a fraction of the Persian host. But numbers alone do not decide battles. With flawless timing, Alexander led a daring cavalry charge straight into the Persian center, scattering Darius's troops and shattering the empire itself. In one afternoon, the Persians lost centuries of dominance, and Alexander became the Great, carving out an empire stretching from Greece to India. What's remarkable is not just his victory, but how a single man's vision and tactics redrew the map of the ancient world down. Let's move to 216 BCE, and one of the bloodiest ambushes in military history, the Battle of Cannae. Rome was the rising giant of the Mediterranean, but standing against it was Hannibal of Carthage, commander so cunning that Roman mothers frightened their children with his name. At Cannae, Hannibal deliberately offered the Romans what seemed like victory. He placed his weakest troops at the center, inviting Rome's massive legions to push forward. But this was a trap. As the Romans surged, Hannibal's cavalry swept around the flanks, encircling the enemy completely. In a matter of hours, up to 50,000 Roman soldiers were cut down. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman history, a lesson in strategy so perfect that military academies still study it today. Yet Rome, unlike so many others, refused to die. Despite the catastrophe, they rallied, adapted, and eventually destroyed Carthage itself. Still, Cannae remains a chilling reminder of what brilliance on the battlefield can achieve. From Italy, we leap forward to 730 to CE, to the fields near Tours in modern-day France. The Muslim armies of the Umayyad Caliphate, having swept across Spain, now pushed deep into Frankish territory. Their opponents were led by Charles Martel, a man who would later be called the Hammer. At stake was nothing less than the religious and cultural direction of Europe. After a brutal clash, the Franks held firm, breaking the Muslim advance. The Battle of Tours is remembered as the moment when the spread of Islam into Western Europe was halted, shaping the continent's future as a stronghold of Christianity. Without Martel's stand, the map of Europe might look entirely different today. Jump ahead 6 centuries to 1410, where the fields of Grunwald witnessed one of the largest battles of medieval Europe. The Teutonic Knights, a feared military order, stood against a coalition of Polish and Lithuanian forces. The knights were confident, armored, and experienced. But as the day wore on, their lines broke under the weight of the combined armies. The Teutonic Order suffered a devastating defeat, ending their dreams of expansion in Eastern Europe. The battle shifted the balance of power in the region, paving the way for the rise of Poland-Lithuania as a dominant state. It's a lesser-known clash, but one whose ripple effects lasted for centuries. But if Grunwald was a medieval turning point, then 1571 brought a naval battle that determined the fate of the Mediterranean, Lepanto. For decades, the Ottoman Empire had dominated the seas, threatening Christian Europe with invasion. At Lepanto, a coalition of Christian states, united under the Holy League, faced the Ottoman fleet. What followed was one of the largest naval battles ever fought with oared ships. Cannons roared, ships collided, and warriors fought hand-to-hand on decks slick with blood. In the end, the Holy League destroyed much of the Ottoman fleet, halting their advance into the Western Mediterranean. It was a victory that inspired poets and painters, and it marked the beginning of the end of Ottoman naval supremacy. Now, let's step into the modern era, to 1815 and the thunder of cannon fire at Waterloo. Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who had dominated Europe for nearly 2 decades, faced his final reckoning. After escaping exile, he had rebuilt his army and threatened once again to remake the continent. But at Waterloo, a coalition led by Britain's Duke of Wellington and Prussia's Field Marshal Blucher stood against him. The battle raged all day, with fortunes swinging back and forth. Napoleon's famed Imperial Guard made a last desperate charge, only to be repulsed. By nightfall, the French army was in ruins, and Napoleon's dream of empire was finished. Waterloo entered our language as a symbol of ultimate defeat, but it also ushered in a century of relative peace in Europe, a fragile peace, but one that shaped the 19th century. A century later, the world faced a new kind of war. In 1942, on the banks of the Volga River, the Battle of Stalingrad became the turning point of World War II. Hitler had thrown the might of Nazi Germany into capturing the city named after his rival, Joseph Stalin. The battle became a nightmare of urban warfare, snipers in ruined buildings, soldiers fighting room by room, civilians trapped in the carnage. Winter closed in, supplies dwindled, and the German Sixth Army found itself encircled by the Red Army. Starving, freezing, and hopeless, the Germans surrendered after months of brutal combat. Stalingrad was more than just a battle. It was the moment when the tide of the war turned against Hitler, a signal that Nazi Germany's days were numbered. Yet while Stalingrad marked the collapse of one empire, another great battle signaled the decline of another. In 1944, the Battle of Normandy, better known as decisive, Allied forces stormed the beaches of France. The largest amphibious invasion in history unfolded under the guns of German fortifications. Soldiers waded through surf under relentless fire. Entire units were cut down before reaching dry land, yet the Allies pressed on. By the end of the day, a foothold was secured. Normandy became the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, opening the Western Front and sealing Hitler's fate. Every freedom enjoyed today in much of the world owes something to the sacrifices of that day. And finally, in 1954, a battle in a remote corner of Southeast Asia ended one empire and set the stage for another conflict. At Dien Bien Phu, French forces fortified a valley in northern Vietnam, confident they could crush the Viet Minh insurgents. But the Viet Minh, under General Vo Nguyen Giap, dragged heavy artillery through jungle mountains and laid siege. For weeks, French forces endured relentless bombardment. When they finally surrendered, the French colonial presence in Indochina collapsed. This battle didn't just end French rule. It opened the door to American involvement, leading to the long and bloody Vietnam War. Dien Bien Phu was proof that even the mightiest empires could fall to determination, strategy, and the will of a people fighting for independence. 10 battles, 10 turning points in the human story. From the dusty plains of Marathon to the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, each of these moments shaped the world in ways their participants could never have imagined. They remind us that history is fragile, that a single victory or defeat can redirect the destiny of nations, alter religions, and redraw the map of the world. The legacy of these battles lives on not just in textbooks, but in the cultures, freedoms, and conflicts we know today. And as we look back, we can't help but wonder, what future battles will one day be remembered as the moments that defined tomorrow?